with an explanation, because people were then explaining to whoever was asking the question that Zuma sits with information of our agents that have been infiltrated to the organization, whom we are developing and nurturing, that they should develop through the ranks of the ANC, so that they become part of the people who lead the ANC. In other words, who would make then these intelligent organization run the ANC.
So these foreign agencies would have their own...
Yes, they would have their own people now leading the ANC, which would be easier for them to succeed in their projects. And their worry was that because I had information about their agents, they don't know when will I use that information to stop or to interrupt their kind of work that they were doing, or stop it. And they thought, therefore, Zuma must be removed from the decision-making structures of the ANC. So he must be away from that, so that they have a free passage to do whatever they wanted to do. It was important for us to know, because then it meant how we operated, we should bear that in mind. But also, it was important to know that whilst we were moving for the kind of negotiations, these organizations were seeing the process going on. In other words, they were not just working against us in the process of us fighting for our freedom. That was a clear indication that as we get into government, they will still continue the work against us. Of course, that would say, it was important for us to know, because it would say, what then do we do to protect ourselves, to ensure that we also are aware of what is happening as we move forward. And that information was very important for us.
Can I ask you on
Fine.
that?
Fine.
Because I think one of the key moments again in your opening statement, which I was very surprised you weren't actually asked follow-up questions on. It seemed as if you made the opening statement and then suddenly we were talking about things that were very recent, was that after the ANC's elective conference in 1991 in December, which, by the way, my mother took me to as a baby. I was 2 years old at that conference.
Okay.
Yeah. After that elective conference, you were removed after you went to a conference in London to discuss negotiations as Chief of Intelligence of the ANC, and former President Thabo Mbeki was removed as Head of Negotiations in the ANC. And this happened after you received subsequent intelligence reports that this plan was underway. How did that process make you feel when you realized that suddenly now you've been removed as Chief of Intelligence of the ANC?
What was important when I received this information, 1990, and the ANC had taken a decision to have a conference which was consultative.
Yes.
In other words, the ANC realized you had comrades who were in exile, part of some comrades who were in prison, who had come out, but others who had been operating inside the country. We had never had an opportunity to sit down in a bigger setting of a conference to discuss our strategy, how we're going to be moving forward. So the 1990 conference was a first.
Sure.
That will all be together. And that was a conference these intelligence organizations felt was important, and they thought it will elect leadership. And their objective was to make that conference get rid of me.
Right.
In other words, I should not continue being a member of the National Executive Committee. And that's why they thought they should therefore work in such a way that in that conference, I get out of leadership. But that conference was not an elective conference. It was a consultative conference. So they got to know that in fact, there would be no election of the leadership. They then decided to pull back their plan and look at things differently, how they would execute their plan. When they realized that the conference was not elective,
Yeah.
they then did more investigation or gather information about their strategy, how this will succeed. Of course, the ANC in that conference took a decision to hold the elective conference in 1991. It was after that again further information came to me that their investigation made them to realize that this conference would not do what they thought it will do, to elect a leadership. And then they felt they should therefore hold back. But once they realized that the ANC took the decision to have a conference in 1991, their point was that the time was too short for them to succeed in getting rid of me.
Completely.
Completely. One, they realized that Zuma had a very large support in the ANC and had 100% support in his province, where he comes from in Natal, and felt that in the coming conference, they wouldn't be able to get rid of me. And they then adjusted their kind of process of dealing with me, that they would, since they can't get rid of me, they would then make sure that after that conference, I should not continue as the chief of intelligence. I should be removed after the 1991 conference. So that's a decision they took a while ago. So when I was aware of this, we of course discussed this with Comrade Joe Nhlanhla, and we are aware of it. But I did not know how this would be implemented.
Yeah.
Of course, there was a kind of a decision that after the conference, President Mandela would be the new president, will go to the United States to raise money with the President Gobi, with the Comrade Gobi, who was the Treasurer General. That also Comrade Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma will go to attend a conference in United Kingdom, which was dealing with the constitutional candidate. It was a conference on the constitution, etc.
Right.
So I had an idea that this was their plan now, that after the conference, I should be removed. So when we were away,
Yeah.
because I did not know, how would they remove me? Because naturally the ANC structures should be the ones that do so. So when we were in London, as I was listening to the BBC Focus on Africa, I heard that the meeting of the National Working Committee of the ANC, which had met for the first time, had taken a number of decisions. And the decisions that really rang the bell in me was that Thabo Mbeki was removed as the chief negotiator, and Jacob Zuma was removed as the chief of intelligence. So to me, in other words, these organizations had found a way to implement that decision. What remained the critical question for me was, how could a plan by intelligence organizations get implemented by the National Executive Committee of the ANC? That was what you call an interesting question to ask.
And it suggested that, as you had feared, there were people within the ANC leadership at that time who were working on behalf of foreign interests.
It was as clear as anything.
Now, on that, and I think that is, especially for people in my generation, we've been told these negotiations were perfect.
Yeah.
You said, and you issued a challenge to the nation on Monday to connect many of these dots. And I went back to connect some of them.
Okay.
So I'm going to put something to you.
Okay.
Not like Advocate Pretorius, don't worry. Because you weren't asked about the statement.
Not at all. Not at all.
And I went back and I asked myself, who replaced who? And I saw that as Chief of Intelligence, I believe you were replaced by Mr. Lekota, Terra Lekota.
Terra Lekota, yes.
And I saw that former President Mbeki was replaced by current President Ramaphosa.
Yes, that's what happened. When Mbeki was removed as chief negotiator, Cyril Ramaphosa was put in his place, and in the intelligence, Terra Lekota was put, which was quite something to me as an intelligence person at the time. But that's what happened.
Does that, if I'm connecting dots here, does that suggest in any way that their appointment had anything to do with the earlier plan that you mentioned?
Well, when I give this background, I leave it to people to make their own conclusions. Okay. Absolutely, because if the removal of Mbeki and Zuma was on the basis of this plan, then the question is, those replacements, were they were replacements that were accidental? What were they? So I leave it to people to make their own conclusions, because what is important is that this was the plan now being implemented. So the earlier we were removed, that's what these people wanted. But that's what happened.
Okay, I won't ask any further on that, because it does lead me to think, coming to a little bit more recent times, about a question about our history, about all the ANC administrations. When you were talking, I started thinking, how many of these ANC administrations have had people that either we know or we don't know were infiltrating the ANC for foreign agendas? Do you think that in cabinet, in even parliament, at the highest levels of the party, do you think that infiltration in the ANC continued past the 90s and maybe even into the present day?
Well, I think, to me, the critical point on that information was that as we were entering negotiations, at a certain level of those who had been running the country with their friends had very clear kind of approach to the situation that was coming in. We were not reaching a stage where we were saying, then, here we are, let us come together, let us work like this. There were people secretly who were working out plans how to continue to make sure that the interests, their interests, were indeed entrenched. And entrenched in the new kind of system, which we will all agree we are now in a new kind of situation. But they were beginning to implant themselves so that they should be in control of the situation all the time. The very fact that the two organizations were foreign, one of the three was a South African one. In a sense, if it was an intelligence organization that had belonged to the apartheid regime, now that organization was being handed over to the internal, to the external intelligence organizations, so that it will continue, but using the people who were inside the country. Probably some of them would have been integrated in the new intelligence organizations, but it meant there would be people whom we would be thinking that they are our people, but they would be serving the interests of other people. In other words, it gives an impression that therefore we were beginning to get into a situation where there would be people who would be saying, these are our people, but there would be people belonging somewhere. It meant that they were hell-bent to control the country through those kind of connections they were making at the time.
This question of intelligence and the way that information has flowed across our borders and within our borders became very crucial to another part of your opening statement, which was related to the period in which the NPA was deciding or not deciding whether to bring charges against you. And you linked that to the other dots that you drew on intelligence and a broader conspiracy to remove you from the leadership of the ANC. So I'd like to come to that period and just to ask you to reflect on how you think that period formed part of the broader story that you told from 1990.
What, to me, knowing that story, whatever has been happening ever since, it was clear because I knew the plan and I could see it unfolding. For an example, as I indicated, when we got to 1994, the year of elections and the coming in of the new kind of government, knowing this as I did, I took a decision to move off from the limelight, knowing this, because I knew that it means that I will always be a target. So I decided on my own to say, let me move away from the limelight. I then discussed with the president of the ANC, which was Mandela, that I think you need to give me, I'm asking to go to my province to deal with violence. Because the violence at that time, political violence, was very high. Without telling Madiba that I was, in a sense, trying to move away from where the attraction was given to me. I said, look, can you allow me to go to Natal to deal with violence, because that way it would look like the root of the violence was. And Madiba said, no, I want to utilize you in the national level. So I said, look, you have more than enough people to deal with that. I think the violence, because it is in Natal, these are the predominantly Zulu. I understand them, but I think I could help because no matter what kind of government you have, if this violence continues, it will undermine the country. And I had a lot of discussion, and Madiba agreed with me that indeed I should go to help stop violence. I did not tell him that I'm actually trying to take other positions so that I move away from the limelight. So he agreed. So I was taken to the province,
Yes.
where I I began to operate from instead of the national. But unfortunately, members of the ANC in the same year, 1994, they felt that I needed it to remain in one form or the other at the national level, particularly because President Tata Walter Sisulu, who was then the deputy president of the ANC, was not ready to continue. He wanted to call it a day, and we in the organization felt that Thabo Mbeki should become the deputy president. And the comrades then came to me to say, look, you need to come back to the area that Mbeki was occupying, the national chairperson of the ANC. I thought that was now bringing me back. So I tried to say, look, man, I'm dealing with a serious situation. And they said, no, you come up. Indeed, at the end, in the conference of the ANC in 1994, I was elected the national chairperson of the ANC. And Mbeki moved to the deputy president. That was still maintaining me in the limelight, which I was trying to move away.
Yeah.
But whilst that was the case, whilst I thought I was away, but I think my enemies felt I was still up there. Of course, the government here was dealing with the own thing. I was in the provincial government. I was an MEC of Economic Affairs and Tourism, busy down there. But it became clear for the other fellows that the plan to get me out of the way continued. Because suddenly I was supposed to have participated in the arms deal. And I had nothing to do with the arms deal, but I remained the one person who was suspected to have done wrong things. No one of those who were in the arms deal was thought to have done anything wrong except me. I was forced, therefore, to feel that that plan is working and people want me totally out. Then suddenly I was removed as a deputy president.
Yeah.
In the government. And then finally I was investigated about the arms deal, and I said, how do I come in? And finally charged. And of course, the case has been going on